Hello, everyone. My name is Doug Gentili. I'm President Emeritus of James II Association, and I would like to just share a testimony about some amazing things that God has done through me. I mean, just absolute miracles, and this is for anyone who um, wants to be encouraged about the power of God in Jesus Christ, and so let me just say that uh, I grew up on, in a nominally Christian family. My parents took me to church, but I did not have a relationship with Jesus at all. I mean, I behaved pretty much as the world did. Um, so I just when I went to college, I was pretty worldly, and what I would do is I would hang out with people who were you know uh, into pre-love and drugs and I mean I was not a hardcore druggie at all, but I hung around with that crowd and I didn't think anything of it. Um, it all came pretty much down when I decided to hitchhike from Columbus, Ohio, where I was a student at Ohio State University, to Los Angeles, California. And back then it was very common for kids, to try to ask for rides. This was in the early 1970s. Um, it was at the height of the anti-Vietnam War protests, and I was very active in those protests, and so I hitchhiked to Los Angeles, California, and um, I just did it as it was during the summer. I just did it for fun, to just have a cool summer. So so I got out to the West Hollywood, and I stayed at a hotel on the Sunset Strip. So uh, being very worldly at the time, um, I kind of browsed through one of the local newspapers and I saw an advertisement for a strip club. It said Triple X, about 2 miles down the road. So I said, "Wow, that is really cool." So I stood on the Sunset Strip with my thumb out to hitchhike um, down of the Sunset Strip, and it was a pretty crowded night. It was a weekend night, and the car stopped and they waved for me to come in. So it was a two-door sedan car, and there were two people in the front seat, and another person in the back seat who I understood was also hitchhiking. So I got in the back seat, and so we were driving down the Sunset Strip when they uh, they made a turn off of the Sunset Strip, and I told the driver, I said, "Excuse me, but I'm going straight." And at that point, the person who was in the front seat on the shotgun, the driver, pulled out a gun and basically told us to take out our wallets um, and keep our heads down. And they drove us around and terrorized us, uh, and finally drove into the barrio of East LA, um, it was a very terrifying experience. They made us take off our shoes, I guess, so you don't chase after the car or something. And they had us um, get out. I'm sure it's fake license plates, and and we're broke, and and I was very grateful because I could see the barrel of that gun, I was just aiming at me, and And at that point, um, I just recalled, how my cousin, who was the son of my a very close cousin. He was the son of my father's twin brother. Kept telling me about the Christian gospel, about of the truth of Jesus Christ, uh, and the life that and decision we need to make, um, to make sure that that we uh, are reconciled to God because of the fact that we're sinners, uh, uh, and so we cannot, and no matter all the good things we do, we can never get to a point where we're reconciled to God on our own. Um, so we need that relationship with Jesus Christ, and my cousin kept telling me that it's not a matter of how you grow up. If you grow up in a church, or you believe intellectually in God and Jesus, because in the book of James in the Bible it says that even the demons recognize the existence of God and Jesus. They believe in God and Jesus, but of course they don't have a relationship with God and Jesus, because they're evil, and so if we don't have that relationship with Jesus Christ, then we're separated from God, um, uh, and I kept hearing that message, but like a lot of Americans, just countless millions, who nominally Christian, you know, um, um, we feel, well, yeah, we believe in Jesus. But people ask me as I was growing up if I was a Christian. I said, yeah, my dad made me go to church. Um, but that going to church and being baptized as a baby and calling yourself with a denomination, Catholic, Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran, whatever, doesn't get you to heaven. Only that relationship with Jesus Christ, and the only thing that really counts is that decision. That is the most important decision we could ever make in our lives, because it's the next life that counts. And I can tell you many accounts of people who had near-death experience, and they experienced either heaven or hell or both, and it is real. Um, and the next life we do not want to be separated from God. So it just came back to me. What my cousin kept saying, and it became very real at that point, because I was facing death in the barrel of a gun, and so um, I took an inventory of myself, and I said, if um, if I would have died right there, what would have happened? Would I have gone to heaven with God? And I honestly could not say I could have. And it wasn't that much longer after that it finally dawned on me what the gospel is all about, and what really impressed me was I grew up um, in the civil rights movement, and just to see um, so many accounts of black people, African American people, who went through horrendous persecution while fighting for their rights, and including people being jailed and beaten up and everything. And there's so many accounts uh, of these civil rights activists singing songs glorifying God and Jesus, even while in jail cells. And I said, no, there's something supernatural that is moving that. And, just to see how God um, rewarded the civil rights movement because of so many of the leaders relying on God, to bring about successes, and equality, and at least a sense of justice, with the passage of the Civil Rights Act. in 1964, and just to see how that um, brought about at least um, a reckoning in the United States of America that this type of discrimination and racism was totally unacceptable. Uh, you know, it didn't end the racism, didn't end the racial injustices, but at least it put us on um, a position where our nation collectively and legally said is not acceptable. And most hearts were changed through that, through the power of God. So at that point, I did make the decision to accept Jesus. I had a lot of ups and downs, um, but it was a process. But over the years and over the decades, God was very faithful and strengthened my faith. Um, and did so many miracles, which I don't have time to get into. I want to keep this under half an hour. Um, so I just want to say that a fast forward, I'll go into probably another a big miracle. Uh, I'm going to fast forward into the year 2012. It was late in the year, and I was working for the U.S. government, doing investigations, especially civil rights investigations, and working on some environmental projects, and I was also doing outreach evangelism at George Washington University um, after work, and I'd already had been given a pretty strong calling to do racial reconciliation ministry. So I was doing that, and I remember I was standing in front of the library um, of George Washington University, and I heard a very clear message, and it was repeated over that I needed to quit my job, leave my federal job, and of course I was old enough. I was old enough to retire. Of course, it would be a big drop in compensation, but it was like, okay. I was trying to figure out what that was all about, and I kind of I concluded, at least in the short run, that well, it was just a bunch of crazy thoughts, and so I was basically ignoring a clear calling from God. So I just ignored it and kept going on with my job. Well, God did some things to get my attention. It wasn't long after that, and I remember it was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my federal office, and it was late in the day, so it was time to maybe go down and you get a snack and get maybe a soda or something, and I brought it up, and I remember I could not swallow it. I said, "Whoa, what's going on here?" And no, I mean I was choking. I could not swallow anything, and and I went home, and the same thing happened, and I it was so bad that I had to go into the hospital for IV infusion to keep me alive, and it went on for day after day after day, and I was just crying out to God, "What's going on?" And finally I went to this other doctor, and I said, I just had my second IV infusion to keep me alive, and I said, "Look, my esophagus, my throat is closed. I cannot swallow. Um, you're going to have to put a feeding tube in my stomach or something, because I cannot eat, I cannot drink." And uh, and he kind of looked at me thinking, Chris said, you don't worry about this. It's going to be okay. And I'm saying, okay. And he refused to do it, and it wasn't long after that I said, God, I think, I kind of remembered that, I think you're trying to get my attention here. And, I submitted to God, pretty humbly. And uh, and that night I went home and was able to drink 15 ounces of orange juice, and after that I was able to gradually get my my drinking and eating back. And then it just came back to me, um, what God had done, of the message. So um, the next thing that He led me to do, after I finally submitted, was to go to a doctor. Okay, and I had already I had been diagnosed with cancer, prostate cancer, uh, 13, 14 years earlier in 1999, and I had a very messy operation. But at Johns Hopkins University, they thought they had gotten it all, and there's some miracles involved in that too, which I won't get into here. So I had declared myself cancer free, and every year I would have a cancer free celebration in my church and invite people to come and help me celebrate being cancer free. Okay, so I went to the doctor, and I went through the tests, and it was determined that I had late stage cancer. I mean, this cancer had suddenly come roaring back. Okay, and of course I had no way of knowing that, because at the time I did not have symptoms. So God was getting my attention. Uh, he saved my life by giving this message, to leave my job, and then the drama with my throat not being able to swallow, and then the calling to go see a doctor, um, and the whole message about leaving my job was because um, it was determined that the cancer was having certain impacts on my body, and one was uncontrolled blood pressure issues, and if I would have kept on a strict 9 to 5 job with a structured um, life, I could have dropped dead. You know, So God was saving me for a purpose, because you know, um, I did leave my job, and I was actually given an opportunity to kind of like delay a little bit, and the Holy Spirit again was very uh, powerful, because I actually went into I was enforcing civil rights, and and doing investigations, and I was you had pretty good a rapport with the top civil rights official for the U.S. Department of the Interior, and where I worked. So when I went to her office, and I explained to her my situation, um, uh, she gave me the option. Just give me options. She did a very good job, because she's very concerned about my condition. But she did say that if with cancer, I could apply for disability retirement, which would be extra money. Um, but it would have entailed a longer process of maybe 3 or 4 months or so to put in the paperwork for retirement. And the Holy Spirit just said, no, the money's not important. What's important is you need to get a flexible schedule. And so I went ahead and put in my retirement papers like right away, after that meeting, and I had a pension, and it was, and I got Social Security, so it was enough to live on. And so then I just asked God. I said, okay, now that I'm out of the government, what do you want me to do? And I already had, as a side thing, I was doing multi-ethnic outreach evangelism at universities, but also I started this nonprofit called James II Association, which I was doing kind of on the side. And God said, okay, this is going to be your main calling now. You're going to, there's a need to try to bridge the racial divide in churches across the United States. There's not enough workers to do this, and he made it clear through many scriptures, um, about what his standards were on racial reconciliation, on unity, on racial justice, on inclusion. That the biblical standards were just overwhelming there, and he needed me to, he anointed me with this calling, to be one of the people, one of many people who are doing this, but still there's not enough of us. But and he said, you're going to do this, and do things that not a lot of other people were doing, including going into segregated areas and trying to break down segregation patterns through advocacy, through partners, and just doing outreach to try to encourage cross-racial fellowships and ethnic liaisons, and bridging the racial divide through partnerships and just friendships, and there wasn't enough of those two things going on. So that was pretty much the main calling that he had for me. But also, that there was a bigger miracle there, because I also had a very strong hobby, and that was writing novels. And over the course of years, I had written some novels, but they were very worldly. But, I mean, they weren't terribly obscene or anything, but they weren't God honoring. They had curse words in it, things like that. And I put it to God, what about my writing calling? And he made it so clear. Those old books, and one of them I got published under a pen name, and to this day he does not want me to promote that book. It's still on Amazon, still being sold somewhere, I guess. People aren't buying it because I didn't tell. I'm not telling people about it. Just destroy all those old books, And I said, okay, well, what do you want me to do? Well, he took an old outline going back 20 or 30 years, of a book, secular suspense drama thriller novel, and he totally changed it around. It was like downloading a movie in front of me. I was like looking at like these scenes. It just came to life, and a lot of the same characters, but they were different. This was family friendly with strong Christian themes, and I said, "Wow, God, what do you want me to do with this?" And so it became clear he wanted me to sit down and write what I was seeing, what the message he gave me with this book. So I said, oh wow, this is going to take a while. With the Racial Reconciliation Ministry, there are a lot of scenes, a lot of twists and turns in the plot and everything. And I said, probably have to take a year part-time to write this book, because the previous books, non-Christian books I had written, it took years to write some of them. I mean, it was a struggle, but this was like, wow. I mean, it was like everything came together, and it was 350 typewritten pages. In book, it translated about 250 pages, 350 double-spaced typewritten pages, and I wrote that book in 23 days. I mean, that's only God's miracle. And it's like, God, what do you want me to do with this? I mean, it's I had a vision. Wow, since God has apparently inspired this book. Hey, and I had a very worldly attitude about it. I said, maybe I should get on the New York Times bestseller list. So I went through the regular publishing route. I found out that God opens doors, God closes doors. I couldn't even get this book read because of backlogs, because of agents not looking at stuff if you don't have a name already. I couldn't even get it read. Um, and I was determined, to get, a small publisher to look at it, and finally I got a small um, print, of the book, but that was not what God wanted me to do. And it became clear. He said, stop doing that. So I actually had a few hundred copies of the book, and I had to, not promote them, not try to get them in stores or anything. And God said clearly, give them away. And and at the time I said, wow, this is amazing, because you know um, what what are you doing? And he made it clear how how it, his ways are much higher than mine, because um, if I would have gotten that book published, because I'm not, I mean, well, published by, by somebody, um, who was like a big publisher or something like that. They don't, promote unknown authors, so I may have maybe sold 500 copies or something, through this publishing deal, and the thing is, it wasn't for the money. I mean, God was not giving me this for money. I had enough money to live on. So when he said give it away, I actually, after that, wrote several other novels, okay? And he said give them away too, okay? And now I understand what he was doing, because it wasn't about making money. It was about encouraging people with gospel messages through fiction and reaching as many people through distribution channels. And he opened up all kinds of ways to give this book away for free, including 2 websites, including just distribution channels. So this book, this miracle book, the first one, is called Rockersine Valley. It's on my current website, christiansocialjustice.org, and then there's a prequel called Cro-Magnon 6, and then I just finished the sequel called Hurricane Lauren, which has the same hero, a Christian Latino James Bond kind of figure hero. So those books have now gotten in the hands of just thousands and thousands of more people than they would if I was just going through the traditional publishing route, which is not kind to unknown authors at all. Okay, people who don't have a name recognition, they chase the rich and the powerful, based on estimates of statistical measures of the distribution channels I used, and the website hits, that Rockersine Valley has reached an estimated over 100,000 people. So God used these books the way he wanted to reach more people the way he wanted to, and showed how flawed my analysis is by trying to go through the traditional publishing route, when he closed all the doors, and that was God, because I'm a published author. I could I could easily just say, hey, look, I published blah 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 blah, and so this is a second book, and I would have gotten probably in the door immediately. But God, I could not even get anybody to read Rockersine Valley in 2013, and now 9 years later, it has hit 100,000 estimated people reading it, and and the other books, also Christian novels, have also reached thousands and thousands of people. So God knows what He's doing, and so I just want to say how blessed I am, because I have been doing this and sending the books out, and he's made it clear that that he's doing miracles in my life. He is keeping me alive, to do this ministry and to send these books out and do racial reconciliation ministry. I just turned over the president of James II Association to his wonderful African American Christian brother who can run an organization better than I can. But there have been so many. You're working with different partners, doing so many initiatives and projects, and I have been. For 9 years now, I've had metastasized cancer. I've had cancer that's all over my body. I have all kinds of terrible side effects from the ongoing treatments. I just had 2 esophagus operations. I'm going to have a third one. I've had damage in my knee. I've got neck pain. I don't know what that's from. I got pains different places. My sleeping is all messed up. I have high blood pressure that's not responding to medicine. I have 5 disabling factors from the cancer and the ongoing treatment, and yet God continues to keep me strong somehow to do this ministry, and I feel, I feel excited. I feel strength when I do this, even though I'm facing all these health issues. And I'm just so grateful to God, I just want to close out this video by saying that based on my experiences and the miracles in my life, when you hear about the Christian gospel, it is so true. It is real, okay? And there's a great divide in the U.S. People who understand the Christian gospel and make the decision for Jesus, and people who have strongholds, and it's so sad because out of love, I want people to understand that. But God has told me that the Christian gospel, it has to be holistic. You have to preach of the Christian gospel and the truth of the Bible. You have to say that verbally, but you also have, especially with this younger generation that's spiritually very cold right now, you have to live it out in love. They have to see not only the truth, but they have to see that we are loving people, especially across racial lines, because they're very justice focused, of these young adults. Loving people across racial lines and care for people who are mistreated and are suffering. They have to see that. They have to see both together. They have to see both together. And the church is so weak because so many Christian leaders, they do one part or the other, but they don't put it together. So many people, you hear them preach the gospel, but they're not emphasizing how to live it out in love. Other Christians, they're very big on secular social justice to help the poor and all this stuff, but they don't talk about the Christian gospel and the gospel underpinning that. We have to have both together, and that is the calling God has given me to preach that message, through word, but also through my life, through act, through an example that He gave me. So I just want to close out this video by, besides my testimony, that there's the evidence of Jesus Christ resurrection is so overwhelming, and the only reason people don't see it is because they have stronghold. They don't even, they're not motivated. They don't care. They enjoy their sin patterns. They're distracted too much by the world, which is influenced by Satan. And it's very sad. But all we have to do is take the blinders off and see the overwhelming evidence of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Um, and I'm not going to hours and hours of just 2 or 3 more minutes. I'm just going to say that when Jesus was crucified, and every Christian and non-Christian reasonable historian do not deny the fact that Jesus lived a life and he was in fact crucified. Okay, that these are historical facts that are undisputed. Okay, and but the Jewish and the Roman authorities all were very hostile to the Christian message and what Jesus was doing. And if all this was fake, if what Jesus was saying was all a fraud and fake, they would have found a dead body of Jesus. They never found a body. And that is undisputed also. No one has ever claimed that they found the body of Jesus Christ. He conquered death. Why? Because he conquered death. And the Roman seal, covering the cave holding Jesus' body was broken. The Roman soldiers guarding the cave would have never allowed that to happen, or else they would have been executed. The only explanation is a miraculous action by God. And there's so many accounts, including non-Christian historian Josephus and others, about the lives of the apostles, Jesus' apostles, after the crucifixion and resurrection, that they could have easily denied and said, "Oh, this was all just a fraud. We were making all this up," because they were given a choice. They could have had a very wonderful life with lots of material amenities and lots of been honored by the society, but they all chose independently now. And you can't, and psychologists say that if you have visions, there's no such thing as a joint conspiracy of visions. They were all touched by the power of Jesus independently, and they all refused. They all refused. That they all faced torture and death. And the Apostle John, was mistreated, and faced exile on the island of Patmos, and the others, just including Jesus' half brother James, were crucified, were murdered and tortured, and because they knew it was real. And if it wasn't real, they would, these apostles would never have subjected themselves to a torture and death, over the following years, and then of course the miraculous transformation of Apostle Paul, which has been totally documented. I mean, Apostle Paul was the number one terrorist against all Christians. He was the ISIS of the Holy Land. He would go out and find Christians to kill and put in jail, and he was totally transformed, by a vision from Jesus Christ, and he became, the number one missionary, taking the gospel to all ends of the world that was known at the time, that he could reach, and that's a miracle. I mean, you cannot explain anything except the fact that Jesus' resurrection was real. Also, if you look at the book of Isaiah, in chapter 53, it describes in detail the crucifixion of Jesus Christ more than 700 years before it actually happened. Now, what's interesting about that is that Christian, non-Christian archaeologists have said that those accounts were real. They they weren't made up after the fact to try to justify a fraudulent Christian theory. Those were written at the time. And the interesting thing is that when Isaiah described crucifixion, because God is providential, he can see the future. That's why some of these prophets predicted Jesus Christ. When Isaiah described crucifixion, crucifixion did not even exist, in the 700th century BC. It only came into play in the Roman Empire 200 or 300 years later. It did not even exist. Okay, now that is God. And there were more than 500 witnesses, to Jesus' resurrection. I mean, if you had more than 500 people in a court of law saying something, they would win their case. Okay, I mean, more than and they were over 300 prophecies in the Old Testament which pointed to Jesus. Over 300. I mean, that is not. That's not possible unless there is supernatural intervention. And you look at the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. They're all independent accounts. That they weren't exactly. If this was all contrived, they would have checked their stories to make sure that everything is exactly the way the other people wrote it. But there was some nuanced differences because they were approached independently. So their accounts are going to be sound and the same on the basic events, but described in a little different way. And nobody who had any credibility would ever cite women, as being the first witnesses, to the resurrection of Jesus Christ, because women were not, back then, were not considered credible witnesses. So if you wanted to make all this up, you would not cite a woman, like Mary Magdalene and some other women who witnessed Jesus' resurrection. You wouldn't do that. So it just had to be true. And biblical accuracy has been verified and was verified so few years after the actual accounts that you can't even compare it to some of the other books that are written, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and all these other books that are written, of the accounts of who wrote them and when they wrote them and everything. So these have been verified. So the evidence is overwhelming. Lifestyles were changed. The Sabbath all of a sudden went from Saturday to Sunday. Just so many things happened which points to the overwhelming evidence of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which means that God is telling us this is true. You just open up your eyes, okay, and you take the free gift of salvation, and we're reconciled with God. We're transformed here, and when you look at the millions of people who, yes, Satan always points to people who so-called Christians who do terrible things, but Jesus in the Bible said that was going to happen. That there are people who would call on his name, but their hearts were very far from him, and he said, "Depart from me." But we need to look at the other side, and that is the genuine transformation of countless millions of people who accepted Jesus. These transformations cannot be described, cannot be attributed to just human efforts. Hardened criminals becoming model citizens, and just miracle after miracle, and people just changing from being self-centered, very sinful, to be very loving and compassionate people, and model citizens. Millions of people. That is evidence. That is strong evidence. So I just want to close out this video by saying thank you so much for taking the time to look at this, and I just pray that everybody makes the right decision. The most important decision in your life you can make is for Jesus Christ. So thank you so much. God bless you. Peace and out from James 2 Association. Um, and have a wonderful 2023, y'all.